All right, guys. So this says James Gray, who's the director of Armageddon Time, by the way, that's a new movie coming out, on casting non-Jewish actors as characters in his movie. He says, I reserve the right. We've had this discussion before when it was related to Bradley Cooper. We talked about Bradley Cooper.
Oh, okay.
Remember, because he was playing that, the not pianist, but he was playing the conductor, the famous conductor, and he had to wear like the makeup. Basically.
Well, what they really were objecting to in that case with Bradley Cooper was the prosthetic nose, and that's like different than just makeup, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of people came for him for that, and also the celibacy thing that he did for Silence. It's like Bradley Cooper just can't catch a break.
Wasn't that Keke Palmer? No, it wasn't Keke Palmer. It was somebody else who's like, I can go 6 months without having sex too.
Guys,
no, it wasn't Keke Palmer. It was someone similarly
annoying. It was like
annoying.
Gwyneth Paltrow or something.
Yeah, I think it was.
I know consistency is not a thing in this industry, but why? I'm super lost. So, Little Mermaid is black, but it's wrong to have
There is no
non-Jewish actors play Jewish people.
There's no consistency in this argument. I am of the opinion that if it's a historical figure, you should go for as accurate of a look as possible. If there's source material, you should go for I give leeway there. When it's a fictional character, I give leeway. I understand that is not the most internally logical or consistent argument, but I see more leeway there. And remember that a lot of these people come from theater where you can cast men to play women. You can cast women to play men, and they don't look at it the same way that most people do.
Okay, here's one difference. When the girl playing the Little Mermaid gets race swapped for Ariel, okay? That's because they got in a boardroom and talked about it and the social impact that it would have to race swap her for a black girl and what it would mean for representation. That's the reality behind that decision. But when you cast Bradley Cooper as a Jewish character, it's probably because there is a shortage of Jewish actors to choose from if you're looking to cast him.
I just want them to write down their own rules.
Wouldn't that be nice to have like an actual freaking rule book to go by?
I mean, there's also the reality that like there is a shortage, or not a shortage but just a scarcity of a scarcity of people to cast if you're looking for someone of that specific race. Yeah. So if you're looking to cast only Native Americans in a TV show or movie, then you're going to see some recurring faces because there's just a smaller pool to choose from.
Yeah, I see a lot of especially that's of all of them. Probably Native Americans have it's like Zahn McClellan gets in literally everything.
And there's no shortage of
Lou Diamond Phillips.
When there's no shortage of redhead white girls to cast as Ariel. Just cast Sadie Sink,
Kate Mara.
But by that logic, shouldn't Jewish actors be even more insulted than that they didn't get casted?
Well, this director is saying because he is of Russian Jewish descent, and it's partly based on it's a dramatic retelling of something that happened in his own life. He says he reserves the right to cast whoever he wants, and he's right.
I agree,
but I feel he shouldn't even need to have Jewish heritage to reserve that right because he is in charge of casting.
If somebody wants to make a movie and they want to tell a story of another culture and they don't want to cast somebody that looks exactly like that culture, I don't see a problem with that. But I'm fairly consistent that I'm okay with a lot of the swaps as long as it's not mentioned in the material. But it says Gray defends the decision to cast how he wanted, noting that as a Jewish person, I reserve the right to cast who he wants. I think that whoever the casting director is should have the right to cast who they want. Remember, we talked a lot about this with when they got rid of when that whole movie was being made, what was called Rub and Tug, the movie about that Scarlett Johansson was going to do.
Scarlett Johansson was going to play a transgender female to male identifying mafia member,
and then she had to drop, and then they pushed her out of it. She was already raw from all the backlash from playing Ghost in the Shell. from playing the character in Ghost in the Shell, and that's it. So
Why'd she get backlash for that?
Because the character's not even Asian, right? The character's a cyborg. But because it was based on a manga, like that's it. There was pushback there. So
is the director of Little Mermaid a mermaid, and thus they can?
That's the argument that
really, truly, the director of The Little Mermaid is an old, stuffy, mothball-ridden executive at Disney who, immediately after casting Halle Bailey, forced the idea of inserting her racial identity into the character
in the marketing,
and she just accepted it because this is her breakout role and she's not going to push back on that.
Here's the part I didn't like about this, because he gets whiny in one of these paragraphs. He says he also calls pushback on the casting choice personally offensive and argues that the demand to only cast Jewish actors for Jewish roles can lead to stereotyping. He's right about the second part. The part about being offensive says spare me, bro. But he's right. Like they simultaneously want to cast things where nobody's ever stereotyped ever, while also only casting people who fit those roles, right? It's like when they're like, why aren't there more Asian people in Karate Kid? How freaking racist and offensive can you be? It's not a... It's like, are you saying that all Asian people do martial arts? That's They did the same thing with Iron Fist. They're like, why isn't Danny Rand Asian? I'm like, well, first of all, the character of Danny Rand was never Asian in the comics. Second of all, you make it sound like the only people that ever did martial arts were Asian, which is a super racist thing to assume.
Well, it's ignoring the reality of how martial arts assimilated into American culture.
So it says, does the person, this was the best example, was the Marlon Brando one. So he says, does that person watch The Godfather and complain that Marlon Brando is from Omaha, Nebraska and not an Italian New York guy? He continues, at some point we have to acknowledge that our whole function as artists is to try and step into the consciousness of someone else and find compassion and find something of emotional power in doing that. But why does this argument never seem to work both directions?
Well... Like, when I see him pointing out that irony, I just think it's because certain ethnic identities are considered more salient than others.
And you wouldn't be allowed to go the other direction.
Right.
You would not be allowed to cast a traditionally black character as white anymore. That's not going to be allowed.
I suppose if it's historically relevant, that's... Yeah. Obviously, the casting decision should stay true to who that real historical figure was. I think about what they did to the character in Doctor Strange when they got rid of the ancient one, and because the character was Tibetan in the original, and then they made it. I don't remember her name, the actress's name. The
white lady.
She's a really famous one. But they did that because China's like, no Tibetans in this movie. Sorry.
Seriously.
Yeah. China's like, not on our watch.
But I thought that they never ended up getting shown in China anyway.
This is from the first Doctor Strange, not the second.
Oh.
Yep.
Well, now I see why they wanted to get back at them.
Yep.
Interesting.
China's like, yeah, and
they're
see
like,
that
now. Then Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness was like, hey, I'll raise you a cameo of the Epoch Times.
Yeah,
like a little too extreme.
I'm also picturing whoever the hell it was in Disney that's reading the Epoch Times that even knows what the hell that is.
Like, it's such a weird thing to insert in there.
Yep.
No one even noticed it.
So it says the one version of a story is that that Gray says, okay, I want to talk about a little bit about what this movie's about. It says the film's inciting incident, based on a real experience Gray had as a child, involved Johnny, played by Jalen Webb, a young black boy who agrees to steal a school computer with his Jewish friend Paul, played by Michael Banks Repeta. They're both arrested, but Paul is allowed to leave with his father while Johnny is left with the police, after which the two boys never see one another again. The criticism, may I say, would be valid if I tried to tell the story from Johnny's perspective, Gray explained. That would be asinine. They really do want a world now where you're not allowed to tell any story other than your own. You're not allowed to be creative or even think that you could create a story because it's not your lived experience.
Yeah, so the same faction that's giving him criticism for casting a white actor as a Jewish character, he's with that faction because he's saying that he's not able to tell the story of someone who is not Jewish.
Yeah.
Right? But that's the point of storytelling in the first place, is to hop into someone else's shoes.
And this is kind of what I've been talking about a lot, is that it feels like when I watch old stuff, there is a lack. I think it's the lack of the internet back then, the lack of prevalence of the internet, right? Where the criticism comes hard and fast right away and you can't escape it. It felt like back then writers were more willing to take a chance in something they didn't really fully understand. And sometimes greatness came out of that. But a lot of times, a lot of crap came out of that too. But that's the price you pay. That's the risk you take to take a chance and tell great stories from a realm in which you may not be 110% comfortable. The X-Files did that a lot. There's a lot of amazing sci-fi and science fiction in the X-Files. There's a lot of crap in there too. That's very much a product of its time. Those tend to be the episodes I love. There's an episode called... where there's like basically a killer building based on artificial intelligence. It's awful, and I love it. It's like, but you could tell like that back then it's the 90s. They have no idea what AI is. All they can really think of is like Hal from what's it called? Not Mystery Science Theater, but Hal. You know what I'm talking about. And it's like they didn't know. But they had an inkling, and they did that throughout the show, right? They didn't know 100% what they were going to write about. Sometimes those episodes came out great. Sometimes they didn't. Now, you're not allowed to do that with other cultures or try to tell stories of any consequence, because you're going to be told that you're a bigot for trying to tell a story about something you don't understand fully. But the sad fact is, most people these days haven't lived unique enough lives to be able to make a career out of telling just their own stories. Right. Imagination has to come into it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, there is a very real argument that telling his own story from his childhood is asinine in and of itself. Yeah. Because it doesn't require as much introspection as telling someone else's, does it?
No.
You're just, I mean, in a way, it's less personal.
Oh, and they point out, yes, it was 2001: A Space Odyssey. That was what I was trying to think of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if introspection, like, I don't necessarily think that all art, especially commercial art, because that's what all this is, right? It's still commercial art. You're still selling a product. Like, I don't think all of it needs to be deep, meaningful, or that you have to explore part of yourself. Let's face it. Do you think that this movie is going to be some big multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar movie? No. It's going to get
that's what Amsterdam was supposed to be.
Everything should aim for meaningful.
It's going to...
I agree.
I don't even know if it needs necessarily...
the aim, even if that meaningful part of it is like still rather shallow, it should still be a goal, right?
But I reject the notion that you have had to live some experience to be able to tell a story about a world you don't understand. Otherwise, there would be no superhero comics.
There would be no fiction.
There would be no fiction. And I'm
underneath it all, it's really the assumption or the belief that they're trying to promulgate right now that the only... What is it? I need to articulate this properly, but they're saying that the only depth or meaning in things you've experienced is a byproduct of how you look. And it's a byproduct of how people treat you because of how you look.
Yeah, not
and
where
that's
you grew
the
up.
only reason that you would have anything unique to say.
Yeah. Not where you grew up, not what your family life was like, not the friends you made when you were younger, not your first job, not the thing, only the way you were treated by people on the outset of your life because you were raised and you looked
and how you
way.
look should be, they're saying it should be the only basis for you having anything in common with other human beings.
Yep. And in, to like strongman their argument, they're not saying that how you look determines your whole future, but they're definitely saying it's your starting point. Like it's the one thing that you can never ever escape, and it's like.
Do you believe that?
It's not even. They're framing it as something that we want to escape. It's like I don't even know if that's.
I think in the 90s we were trying to get past that.
Yeah.
And we're taking it back.
Yeah.
What needs to be recognized is like. Yes, your surface level traits are part of you and probably have a lot to do with, your interpersonal interactions and like your relationships and your story, whatever. But like your skin color is not the only basis for which you can have a friendship or a shared experience or commonality with other
Somebody
people.
Pointed out to me, said, they go, yes, those are important things in your life. How many decisions do you make every single day? That affects your life as much as anything else. What time did you get up? What did you decide to wear? What did you
Yeah.
leave early for work? Did you leave late for work? What did you say at work? Who did you talk to first? Who did you choose to interact with? Did you look for a new job today? Do you like your job? You make a million decisions every day in your life, all of which add up to who you are as a person that are every bit as relevant to that thing. It's like they don't want to ask hard questions about themselves anymore.
Back when I listened to music regularly, and I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, but I just don't listen to music a lot. I thought that the truest way to know someone is to ask them their musical taste.
Really?
Yeah.
It's definitely up there.
That I think musical taste is a far,
So
far, far 1,000 times more accurate depiction of a person's character than their race. Musical taste.
depiction of
A person's character.
their values
Yeah,
or
and
their
their values and
emotions.
their general-
Yeah.
Female electronic music and gangster rap. I don't think that defines me. I don't.
Well,
I don't think it has
I
anything
mean,
to do
it's
with what
something
defines
more
me.
salient to you than maybe the fact that you're descended from Poland.
Yeah. Well, I don't listen
That's
to polka.
all we're saying.
So luckily I don't listen to polka. No accordions.
But again, like,
unless it's a Weird Al song.
they're basically saying unless it's your race or the media you consume, there is nothing meaningful or of note about you.
Yeah.
And, it's almost like a hyper focus on race or gender or sexuality or any immutable characteristics is just a way to escape having to confront any vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that's really hurting art right now.
Yeah. So what would you do to fix it? If you were put in charge of these things and you could fix it some way, what would be the first step?
Well, I mean, it's difficult for me to say because I'm not, the creative type of person that needs to be propped up right now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a filmmaker. I am not a screenwriter. But like, if I had the choice to like finance big films that were, doing something to combat this problem, I absolutely would be there.
Yeah.
And we can't just rely on one Mark Wahlberg
Yeah.
funding his own.
Or Mel Gibson.
Yeah, funding their own shit. Like, it's not.
Maybe
And
look
the
for-
money is there. The money exists. The people with money, they're out there. They know, but like, there's just not enough care being put into this. We're really like in the middle of a poverty of.
And the average person
Good
just
entertainment right
consumes
now.
Like, you could put me as like oddly enough somebody like me who kind of makes the joke about how stuff doesn't have to have meaning and everybody tries too hard. Also understands that most people these days are guilty of just consume. Whatever Disney puts out, shove it down your throat.
Your media consumption habits and your race and your sexuality are all that matter about you, and you will be happy.
I will say that I would say like what a person watches might be as good a gauge as any as to like what their as to an idea of their personality. Like I think about it. Like I watch almost exclusively stuff from prior to 2016, and I made the point this weekend. I said, is it really old media that you're longing for, or is it just a callback to a time when life was simpler, when things made more sense, when it was easier to digest the world because there was rules and parameters that followed you that seemed to fit within the spectrum of the world you lived in, and you're yearning for that simpler time as a representative of it.
Can I steel man my argument a little bit more? Mm-hmm. Because we talked about genre, but genre is really vague. You listen to rap and electronic music, but within that there's artists and there's songs.
Okay.
Right?
So
and
I
I
like
think
Tupac, so it's more poetry driven than it is musically driven. Meaning
Correct.
that he was a poet before he was as much as he was an artist.
so that paints more to a more analytical side of you, right? Whereas gangster rap would paint more towards something else.
But I also loved that. But I loved Bone Thugs and Harmony, which was there's very little in the way of actual meaningful lyrics. There's a lot of meaning behind a lot of what Tupac's saying. I saw less of that in early Bone Thugs and
When
Harmony.
you listen to it during your adolescence because you didn't relate to it, that's also something that is meaningful about your personal history. And when I say media consumption habits being considered like part of our identity now, what I really mean is fandom. Finding your identity in being a fan of something is becoming more and more widespread than defining yourself in relation to like your personal relationships, your community,
think that's
your
because
beliefs, your moral foundation.
Do you think that's because people are looking for outside? They're looking for relationships away from the real world because people live more more heavily on their phones and in cyberspace now than they do in the real world. So you find people that are similar to you online in fandom than you do people in the real world.
Yeah, but it's usually people who are only similar to you in this one respect.
In that one way.
And who, like, if you met them in person, you might have absolutely nothing to talk about.
That would be an interesting study to see done. Like, see, like, what overlap, like, look at your average Disney, like, super fan, like, find a baseline amount of content they have to consume that qualifies them as, like, a Disney super fan, and then look at their love life, look at their politics, look at their eating habits, look at where they live, and then try to see where the corollaries are between these people, and what draws them to these subcultures, right? Because I don't really look at them as subcultures as much as I do mainstream now. Like, I don't think of Star Wars and Marvel as part of a genre fandom anymore. I just see them as...
They definitely have that still. I mean, there are people who, like, there are Disney adults who get married on the basis that they share fandom for Disney. Like, I know...
insane.
Like, that seems like it's fake, but it's real. And like, people on first dates ask, like, have you seen The Office, and which character are you from The Office? or
Friends.
Or Parks and Rec, or Friends, or any of these.
Seinfeld.
Yeah, these, serviceable, enjoyable shows, but things that are not, like, relevant to who you are as a person or what you think is important.
To steelman those people that it's... In the past, like, I've mocked them mercilessly, but like, to steelman their arguments, they're talking about archetypes ultimately.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a connection because now
you're just making me feel like I'm evil.
And I'm evil too, dude. I clown them all the time. But when a Jim is looking for his Pam is what he say. I know. And I don't have that as much with shows and movies as I have them with video games, because there's this video game character that's from Final Fantasy VI, Drink Up, that I relate to so much, so insanely much. And if you're in chat, it's King Edgar of Figaro, because he's one of two twins who got abdicated responsibility that wasn't his. And he acts a certain way, and he jokes a certain way, and though at least the way his humor was written for me is like, I feel like I understand where this character comes from, even though it's not real. And you try to find within your life, oh, this person's a this person's a that, but ultimately you're just looking for people to mesh with, and
it's because people are lonely.
No, true.
Because we don't have the third place, as we've talked about before. Like, this other, as everything's become online, we don't have this other physical place to, like, let off steam.
And people are less connected to their families than they used to be.
And the media consumption my point is, it's making it worse, not better.
Yeah. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.